Hello and welcome back to another video with Harry. I will be reading Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 16, Professor Chenway's Prediction. Harry's euphoria at finally winning the Quidditch Cup had lasted a week. Even the weather seemed to be celebrating. As June approached, the days became cloudless and sternly, and everyone felt like doing a stroll on the grounds and flopping down on the grass, with several pits of iced pumpkin juice, perhaps playing a casual game of gobstones, or watching the giant squid propel itself dreamily across the surface of the lake. But they couldn't. Exams were nearly upon them. Instead of lazing around outside, the students are focused in remaining inside the castle, trying to bully their brains into concentrating, while intense drafts of summer air drifted through the windows. Even Fred and George Weasley, who had been spotted working, they were out to take their owls, ordinary wizard levels. Percy was getting ready to take the NEWT, the nasally exhausted wizarding tests, the highest qualification Hogwarts offered. As Percy hoped to enter the Ministry of Magic, he needed top grades. He was becoming increasingly edgy. He gave very severe punishments to anyone who disturbed the quiet in the common room in the evenings. In fact, the only person who seemed more anxious than Percy was Hermione. Harry and Ron had given up asking how she'd managed to attend several classes at once, but couldn't restrain themselves, and they saw the exam schedule that had drawn in front of her. Monday, 9 o'clock, Arts Monastery. Monday, 9 o'clock, Transfiguration. Lunch, 1 o'clock, Charms. 1 o'clock, Ancient Ruins. Hermione, Ron said curiously, because she was liable to explode when interrupted these days. Are you sure you've copied down these times right? What? Snapped Hermione, picking the exam schedule up and examining it. Yes, of course I have. Is there any point in asking how you are going to sit for 2 exams at once? Said Harry. No, said Hermione shortly. Have either of you seen my copy of the Neurology and Grammaticy? Oh yeah, I borrowed it for bedtime reading, Ron said. But very quietly, Hermione started shifting heaps of parchment around on her table. Look for the book. Just then, there was a rush in the window. Hedwig fluttered through it, a note clutched tight to its beak. It's from Hagrid, said Harry, ripping the note open. Buckbeak's apparel. It's set for the 6th. That's the day we finish our exam, said Hermione, still looking everywhere for her Smartnessy book. And they're coming up here to do it, said Harry, still reading from the letter. Someone from the Ministry of Magic and an executor? Hermione looked up, snarled. They're bringing an executor up to the apparel? But that sounds as though they've already decided. Yeah, it does, said Harry slowly. They can't, Ron howled. I spent ages reading up on stuff for him. They can't just ignore all that. But Harry had a horrible feeling that the Committee of Disposal of Dangerous Creature had its mind made up by Mr. Malfoy. Draco, who had noticeably sober since Gryffindor's triumph in the Quidditch final, seemed to redeem some of his old swagger over the next few days. From sneering comments of Harry overhead, Malfoy was certain Buckbeak was going to be killed, and seemed thoughtfully pleased with himself for bringing Hermione and hitting Malfoy in the face on these occasions. And the worst thing of all was they had no time or opportunity to go and see Hagrid because the strict new security measures had not been lifted. Harry didn't dare receive his invisibility cloak from below the one-eyed witch. Exam week began, and a natural hush fell over the castle. The third years emerged from the Transfiguration at lunchtime on Monday, limp, ash-faced, comparing results, and bemoaned the different cauldrons of the tasks that had been set, which had included turning a teapot into a tortoise. Hermione intervened with the rest by fusing about how her tortoise had looked more like a turtle, which was at least of everyone else's worries. Mine still had a sprout for a tail. Was a nightmare. The tortoise is supposed to breathe steam. I still have a water pattern shell. Do you think that'll count against me? After the hastily at lunchtime, the straight back upstairs for the charms exam. Hermione had been right. Professor Flitwick entered test on chewing charms. Harry slightly overdid his out of his nerves, and Ron, who was pattering him, ended with fits of historical laughter and has led away to quiet the room for an hour before ready to perform a charm himself. After dinner, students hurried back to their common rooms, not to relax but to start studying for care of magical creatures, potions, and astronomy. Hagrid pressed over the care of magical creatures exams, and the following morning, with every preoccupied air indeed, his heart did not seem to be in it at all. He had provided a large tub of flesh flabworms for the class, and told them that to pass the test, the flabworm had to still be alive at the end of 1 hour. The flabworm flourished if left their own devices. It was the easiest exam any of them had ever taken, and it had also taken and gave Harry, Ron, and Hermione plenty of opportunity to speak with Hagrid. Beaky's getting a bit depressed, Hagrid told him. Been low on pressure, so checking for Harry's flabworm was still alive. Been cooped up too long, but still I've known the day after tomorrow, one way for another. The potions that afternoon, which was an unfulfilled disaster, try as Harry might, he couldn't get the confusing coconuts to thicken. Snape, standing watch as the air vice pressure, scribbled something that looked suspiciously like a 0 into his notes before moving away. Then came astronomy at midnight on the tallest tower in history of magic on Wednesday morning, in which Harry scribbled everything Freemal focused and told him about the medieval witch hunts, while wishing they could have had the forced coconut sundaes, which was him sniffling classroom. Wednesday afternoon meant herpetology in the greenhouse, under the baking hot sun, and then back to the common room once more, and with a sunburnt neck, thick and longly of his time next day, when it would all be over. The second to last exam on Thursday morning was Defense Against the Dark Arts. Professor Lupin had complained the most unusual exam any of them had ever taken, a sort of obstacle course outside in the sun, where there was words across a deep paddling pool containing Grindelow, across a series of portrait holes full of red cabs squishing their way across a patch of martial white, ignoring misleading directions from a hickey punk climbing up to the tree to the battle with a new boggart. "Excellent, Harry," Lupin muttered as Harry climbed out of the trunk, grinning. "Full marks." Flushing with success, Harry hung around to watch Ron and Hermione. Ron did very well until he reached the hickey punks, which successfully confused him to sinking waist-high in the quagmire. Hermione did everything perfectly until she reached the trunk with the boggart in it. After about a minute inside, she burst out again, screaming, "Hermione!" Professor Lupin started. "What's the matter, Professor McGonagall?" Hermione gasped, pointed into the trunk. "She said I'd failed everything." It took a little while to calm Hermione down. When at last she regained her grip on herself, she, Harry, and Ron went back to the castle. Ron was still slightly inclined to laugh at Hermione in the castle. Ron was still Hermione's boggart, but the argument was advised by the sight meant to the top of the steps. Cornelius Fudge, sweating slightly in his prim-striped cloak, was standing there out of the grounds. He smiled at the sight of Harry. "Hello there, Harry," he said. "Just had an exam, I expect. Nearly finished?" "Yes," said Harry, Hermione, and Ron, not being on speaking grounds. "Lovely day," said Fudge, casting an eye over the lake. "Pity, pity." He sighed deeply and looked down at Harry. "I'm here with an unpleasant mission, Harry. The committee for the disposal of magical creatures had required witness at the execution of the mad hippogriff. As I needed to visit Hogwarts to check on the black situation, I asked to step in." "Does that mean the perils already happened?" Ron interrupted, stepping forward. No, it's scheduled for this afternoon," said Fudge, looking curiously at Ron. "They might not have witnesses this execution at all," said Ron stoutly. "The hippogriff might get off." Before Fudge could answer, two wizards came through the castle doors behind him. Buzz was so ancient he appeared to be withering before their eyes. Another was tall and strapped with a thin black mustache. Harry gathered that they were representatives of the committee of disposal of dangerous creatures, because the very old wizard squinted at Hagrid's cabin and said in a feeble voice, Dear, I'm getting too old for this. 2 o'clock, isn't it, Fudge?" The black mustache man was fingering something on his belt. Harry looked and saw that he was running a broad thumb along a blade of his shining axe. Ron opened his mouth to say something, but Hermione nudged him hard in the ribs and jerked her head towards the entrance hall. "Why'd you stop me, Ron?" said Ron angrily as they entered the great hall for lunch. "Didn't you see them? He's even got her axe ready. This isn't justice." "Ron, your dad works for the ministry. We can't go saying things like that to his boss," said Hermione. But she, too, looked very upset. "As long as Hagrid keeps his head this time and argues his case properly, they can't possibly execute Buckbeak." But Harry could tell Hermione didn't really believe what she was saying. After all around them, people were talking excitedly as they ate their lunch, happily anticipating the end of exams and that afternoon. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione, lost and worried about Hagrid and Buckbeak, didn't join in. Harry and Ron's last exam was devastation. Hermione's Muggle studies. They walked up the marble staircase together. Hermione left them on the first floor, and Harry and Ron proceeded all the way up to the 7th, where there was a class where they were sitting on the spiral staircase, Professor Trenway's classroom. trying to cram a bit of last-minute studying. She's seeing us all separately, Neville informed them as they went to sit down next to him. He had a copy of Unfolding the Future open on his laps, pages devoted to crystal gazing. Have either of you even seen anything in a crystal ball? He asked them unhappily. Nope, said Ron in that hand-off voice. He kept checking his watch. Harry knew what he was counting down to, the time until Buckbeak's apparel started. The line of people outside the classroom shortened very slowly, each person climbing back down the silver ladder. The rest of each person in the class hissed. What did she ask? Was it okay? But they all refused to say. She says the crystal balls told her that if I tell you, I'll have a horrible accident, squealed Neville as he clambered back down the ladder towards Harry and Ron, who had now reached the landing of the ladder. Towards Harry and Ron, who was now reaching the ladder. That was convincing, snarled Ron. You know, I'm starting to think Hermione was right about her. She is a jab in the thumb toward the trapdoor overhead. She's right. She's a right old fraud. Yeah, said Harry, looking at his watch. Now 2:00. Wish she'd hurry up. Perrault came back down the ladder, glowing with pride. She says I've got all the stuff to make a chew, Seer, she informed Harry and Ron. I saw loads of stuff. Well, good luck. She hurried off down the spiral staircase towards Lavender. Ron Weasley, said a familiar voice, a misty voice from overhead. Ron grimaced at Harry as she climbed the silver ladder out of sight. Harry was now the only person left to be tested. He had set himself on the floor, with his back against the wall, listening to the fly buzzing in the sunny windows, his mind across the grounds with Hagrid. Finally, after about 20 minutes, Ron's large feet reappeared on the ladder. How'd it go? Harry asked, standing up. Rubbish, said Ron. Couldn't see a thing. I made stuff up. Do you think she was convinced, though? Meet you in the common room, Harry muttered, as Professor Chainway's voice called Harry Potter. The tower room was hotter than ever before. Curtains were closed. Fire was all alight, and a usual sticky scent made Harry cough as he stumbled through the clutter of chairs and tables where Professor Chainway sat, watching for him before the large crystal ball. Good day, my dear, she said softly. If you would kindly gaze into the orb, take your time now, and tell me what you see within it. Harry bent over the crystal, stared as hard as he could, willing to show he had something other than a swirl of white fog, but nothing happened. Well, said Professor Chainway promptly, delicately, what do you see? His heart was overpowering. His nostrils were stretching with puffed smoke waving from the fire beside him. He thought Ron had said, and he said, said Harry, a dark shape. What does it resemble? Whispered Professor Chainway. I think now. Harry cast it in his mind as it landed on Buckbeak. It's a hippogriff, he said firmly. Indeed, whispered Professor Chainway, scrambling keenly parchment upon her knees. My boy, you may as well be seeing the outcome of poor Hagrid's trouble with the Ministry of Magic. Look closer. Does the hippogriff appear to be having a head? Yes, said Harry firmly. Are you sure? Chainway urged him. Are you quite sure? You don't see it whirling on the ground, perhaps a shadowy figure raising his axe behind it? No, said Harry, starting to feel slightly sick. No blood, no whimpering, Hagrid. No, said Harry again, wanting more than ever to leave this room and heat. It looks fine. It's flying away, Professor Treyway sighed. Well, dear, I think we'll leave it there. A little disappointing, but I'm sure you did your best. Relieved, Harry got up, picked up his bag, and turned to go, but a loud, harsh voice spoke behind him. It will happen tonight. Harry wheeled around. Professor Treyway had gone rigid in another armchair. Her eyes unfocused, with her mouth snagging. Sorry, said Harry, but Professor Treyway didn't seem to hear him. His eyes starting to roll, Harry stood there in panic. She looked as though she was about to have some sort of seizure. She hesitated, thinking of running to the hospital wing, but Professor Treyway spoke again in the same harsh voice, quite unlike her own. The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned upon his fellows. His servant has been chained to this 12 years. Tonight, before midnight, servant will break free and set out to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again with his servant's aid, greater and more trouble than ever before. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will set out to rejoin his master. Professor Treyway's head fell over her own chest. She made a grunting sort of noise, and then quite suddenly Professor Treyway's head snapped up again. I'm so sorry, my dear boy, she said dreamily. The heart of the day, you know. I drifted off for a moment. Harry stood there, still staring. Is there something wrong, my dear? You told me that the Dark Lord's going to rise again, and his servant's going to be back for him. Professor Treyway looked horribly settled. The Dark Lord? He who no must not be named, my dear boy. That's hardly something to joke about. Rise again, indeed. But you just said it. You said the Dark Lord. I think I must have dozed off too, dear, said Professor Treyway. I will certainly not presume to predict anything quite far-fetched as that. Harry climbed back down the ladder of the spiral staircase, wondering, had he just heard Professor Treyway make a real prediction, or had that been her idea of impressive end to the test? 5 minutes later, dashing past the security trolls outside the entrance to the Gryffindor Tower, Professor Treyway's word rounding on his head, people were standing past him in opposite direction, laughing and joking, heading for the grounds and a bit of long-awaited freedom. By the time he had reached the portrait hall and entered the common room, it was almost deserted. Over in the corner, however, Ron and Hermione. Professor Treyway pointed, just told me. Professor Treyway, Harry panted, just told me, but stopped abruptly at their faces. Buckbeak's lost, said Ron weakly. Hagrid just sent this. Hagrid's note was dry this time. No tears had splattered on it, yet his hand seemed to have shaken so much that he wrote, with hardly legible, lost a pale. They're going to execute at sunset. Nothing you can do. Don't come down. I don't want you to see it, Hagrid. We've got to go, said Harry at once. We can't just sit there on his own, waiting for the executioner. Sunset, though, said Ron, who was staring at the window on his glazed sort of way. We'll never be allowed, especially you, Harry. Harry sank his head in his hands, thinking, if only we had the invisibility cloak. Where is it? Said Hermione. Harry told her about leaving it under the passageway of the One-Eyed Witch. If Snape sees me anywhere near that thing again, I'm serious in trouble, he finished. That's true, said Hermione, getting to her feet. But if he sees you, how do you open the One-Eyed Witch tomb again? You say, Disendomus, said Harry. But Hermione didn't wait to rest this sentence, but she strolled across the room, pushing up the door open of the fat lady portrait, and vanished from sight. She hasn't gone to get it, Ron said, staring off at her. She had Hermione reopen the quarter of an hour later with a silvery cloak folded carefully under her robes. "Hermione, I don't know what's gotten into you lately," said Ron astoundingly. "First you hit Malfoy, then you walk on Professor Treyway." Hermione looked rather flattered. They went down to dinner with everyone else, but did not return to Gryffindor afterwards. Harry had his cloak hidden down in the front of his robes and kept his arms folded to hide the lump. The scullery and empty chamber of the entrance hall littering until they were sure it was deserted. They heard the last pair of people hurrying across the hall and the door slamming. Hermione poked her head out of the door. "Okay," she whispered. No one's there. Cloak on." Walking very closely together that no one would see them, they crossed the hall on tippy-toe beneath the cloak. They walked down the stone front steps of the ground. The sun was already sinking behind the forbidden forest, glittering at the top of the branches of the trees. They reached Hagrid's cabin and knocked. There was a minute in the answer. As he did, he looked around for the visitor, his pale face trembling. "It's us," Harry hissed. "We're wearing the invisibility cloak. Let us in and we'll take it off." "You shouldn't have come," Hagrid whispered, but stood back and they stepped inside. Hagrid shut the door quickly. Harry pulled off the cloak. Hagrid was not crying, but he did not throw himself upon their necks. He looked like a man who didn't know where he was or what to do. This helplessness was worse to watch than tears. "Want some tea?" he said. His great hands were shaking. He reached for the kettle. "Where's Buckbeak?" said Hermione hesitantly. "I took him outside," said Hagrid, spilling the milk all over the table. He filled up the jug. "He's tethered to the pumpkin patch. He ought to see the trees and smell the fresh air before." Hagrid's hand trembling so violently, the milk jug slipped from his grasp and shattered all over the floor. "I'll do it, Hagrid," said Hermione quickly, hurrying over to clean up the mess. "There was another one in the cupboard," said Harry, sitting down, wiping his forehead on his sleeve. Harry glanced at Ron, who looked back hopelessly. There isn't anything anyone can do, Hagrid?" Harry asked fiercely, sitting down next to him. "Dumbledore, he tried," said Hagrid. "He's got no power to overrule the committee. He told him Buckbeak's all right, but they scared, the ludicrous Malfoy, threatened him. I expect that an executioner, a Benigna, an old pal of Malfoy's, but it'll be quick and clean, and I'll be beside him." Hagrid swallowed. His eyes were dancing all over the cabin, as though looking for some shred of hope and comfort. "Dumbledore's gonna come down while it happens. Wrote this to me this morning. He said he wants to be with me. Great man, Dumbledore." Hermione, who had been rummaging in Hagrid's cupboard for another milk jug, let out a small, quick stifle sob. She was straightened up with a new jug in her hands, fighting back tears. "We'll stay with you too, Hagrid," she began, but Hagrid shook his shaggy head. "You gotta go up to your castle, I told you. I don't want you watching, and anyone down should see you anyways. If Fudge and Dumbledore catch you without permission, Harry, you'll be in big trouble." Silent tears were now streaming down Hermione's face, but she hid them from Hagrid's bustling and around to make tea. Then he picked up the milk of a bottle and poured some into a jug, and she let out a shriek. "Ron, I don't believe this! It's Scabbers!" Ron gasped at her. "What are you talking about?" Hermione carried the milk jug over to the table and turned it upside down. With a frank squeak, as much as a scrabble to get back inside, Scampers the rat came sliding onto the table. "Scabbers?" said Ron blankly. "Scabbers, what are you doing here?" He grabbed the struggle of the rat and held him up with a light. Scabbers looked dreadful, thinner than ever, large tufts. His hair was fallen out, leaving wide bald patches withering in Ron's hand. I was desperate to free himself. "It's okay, Scabbers," said Ron. "No, cats, there's nothing in here to hurt you." Hagrid suddenly stood up, his eyes fixed on the window. Normally ruddy face had gone the color of parchment. "They're coming!" Harry, Ron, and Hermione whipped around as the men of group walked down in the distance of the castle steps. In front was Albus Dumbledore with his shivering beard gleaming in the dying sun. Next to him was trotted Cornelius Fudge. Behind him came a feeble old committee member and the executioner Manica. "You got to go," said Hagrid. Every inch of him was trembling. They mustn't find you. Go now." Ron stuffed Scabbers into his pocket and Hermione picked up the cloak. "I'll let you out the other way," said Harry. They followed him to the door in the back of the garden. Harry felt strangely unreal, even more when he saw Buckbeak a few yards away, tethered to a tree behind Hagrid's pumpkin patch. Buckbeak seemed to know something was happening. He turned his sharp head from side to side, pawing on the ground nervously. "It's okay, Beaky," said Hagrid softly. "It's okay." He turned to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. "Go on," he said. "Get going." But they didn't move. "Hagrid, we can't tell them what's really happened. He can't kill him." "Go," said Harry fiercely. "It's bad enough you're not in trouble at all." He had no choice as Hermione threw the cloak over Harry and Ron, and they heard voices at the front of the cabin. Hagrid looked at the place where they had just vanished from sight. "Go quick," he said hoarsely. "Don't listen." And he strode back to the cabin, and someone knocked at the front door. Slowly, in a kind of horrified trance, Harry, Ron, and Hermione set off silently around Hagrid's home. They reached the other side and the front door with a snap. "Please, let's hurry," Hermione whimpered. "I can't stand it. I can't bear it." They stared up along the lawn towards the castle. The sun was sinking fast now. The sky had turned clear, purple, tingent grey, but the west was a ruby-red glow. Ron stopped dead. "Oh, please, Ron," Hermione began. "It's Scabbers. He won't stay put." Ron was bent over trying to keep Scabbers in his pocket, but the rat was going berserk, squealing madly, twisting and fabbling, trying to sink his teeth into Ron's hands. "Scabbers, it's me, you idiot! It's Ron!" Ron hissed. They heard the door open behind them and men's voices. "Oh, Ron, please, let's move." "They're going to do it," Hermione breathed. "Okay, Scabbers, stay put." As they walked forward, Harry and Ron was trying not to listen to the rumble of voices behind. Ron stopped again. "I can't hold him, Scabbers. Shut up, everyone will hear us." The rat was squealing wildly, but not loud enough to cover up the sounds of the drifting of Hagrid's garden. There was a jumble of inconsistent male voices and silence. Without warning, the unmistakable whish of a thud of an axe. Hermione swayed in the spot. "They did it," she whispered at Harry. I don't believe they did it." Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more.